Hi everyone, so welcome to Investing for Value. So we're going to take a big challenge today and we're going to look at the four largest airlines in the US, and then we're going to see firstly, are these guys going to survive? And secondly, if they're going to survive, which one is really good to buy? Because as you can probably notice, in the last few weeks, share price of airlines have been dipping in an incredible way. So as you can see by this headline here, major airlines could be bankrupt by the end of the year without action. So how true is this headline? It is very true. If there's no action, these airlines could literally go under because they have been so bad in keeping a really good balance sheet because it's not necessarily bad in the case that if this was a normal year, that'd be fine. But the problem is it's not a normal year and a lot of things have been cut. So, this headline holds a bit of truth. And I'm going to explain why in just a bit when we start analyzing these companies. And as you notice, I've opened so many tabs. So I'm just going to close this one. Take one good last look at it and it's gone. And hopefully not like the airlines though. So here we've got a $50 billion bailout, which is kind of needed for these airlines, and I'll show you why 50 billion is necessarily needed because these are large airlines with expense structures that go into tens of billions of dollars. So 50 billion, it might seem a lot when you look at this figure, but when we look at the numbers, it won't seem that much. And as we can see here, Trump did say we will back the airlines 100%. So, they've got the backing of government already. So you're already feeling a little bit relieved, aren't you? So if we start looking at the statistics here, in terms of passengers, every year you've got American Airlines that take 215 million people, Delta that takes 204 million people, Southwest that takes 162, and United Airlines also 162 million, which these make up the top four in the US. And then you've got Air Canada, but that's not part of the US. And whereas the rest are actually a lot smaller, like Alaskan Airlines 46 million, JetBlue 42 million. So you can clearly see these are the big hitters when it comes to the US. And this industry over time has really consolidated. That's why it's become, the competition isn't as tough these days because there's not a lot, like back in the days, there was a lot of players. There still is a lot of players. You could look at this list, and it's a large amount of players in North America. But in terms of competition, it's mainly these four players, and the rest are like specializing in niche type markets or their own markets. Like say Air Canada, it's focused on Canada, right? Or Alaska Airlines, that's focused on Alaska. Whereas these guys are all over the US and internationally, of course. And you look at the fleet size, American Airlines 1,569, United Airlines 1,380, Delta Airlines 1,349, and Southwest Airlines 754 aircraft, right? And that's a large fleet. And in if we don't count Air Canada, because we know their service in Canada, the next one is Alaska Airlines, which is 329, then JetBlue is 253 aircraft. So you can see these four are by far the largest in terms of the fleet size in America. So let's take a look at Delta Airlines. So Delta is currently at $35.81. Its market valuation is about $23 billion, and its share price has dropped so much the PE ratio is below 5 right now. And as we go to the 1 year chart, we can see this stock price used to be about $58. It's fallen to 35, which in the scheme of things, unlike the cruiser, unlike the cruise industry, this doesn't seem too bad because it's not even cut in half yet. So you kind of looking at this and thinking, okay, they're not being cut in half, but this, mind you, this is a very consolidated industry. Everyone uses airlines, unlike cruise ships. This is kind of an essential thing in terms of the economy. And when things are normal, of course, people expect this to bounce back. So we look at this and we can see 4.91 PE. And then we go to American Airlines, 6.7 billion in valuation. and you know, we look at how much it's dropped. It's about 30, over $30 at the high for the year, and it's dropped to 15. So you can sort of see like the airlines have more or less halved in terms of value, whereas the cruise ship stocks have like gone in. They've dropped by like 60 to 70%, whereas these ones have dropped by 50%, which is still a lot, mind you, a lot indeed. So we look at United Airlines 35.47, and it's giving about just below 9 billion in valuation. And we were stock about a year ago. This one was trading about $90. So in terms of the airline that's taken the biggest hit, United Airline has by far taken the biggest hit by falling about 60% or just over that. And then we look at Southwest Airlines, and valuation's about 19 billion. So you can kind of see like Delta and Southwest Airlines have kind of held up in terms of its valuation. Delta at 23 billion, Southwest Airline about 20 billion, and we look at the 1 year, and the 1 year is about 50 something dollars, 55, mid 50s, and so you know it's more or less stayed in around half. But you can kind of, the one thing about these two airlines is they're more like that premium type company that's really worked hard to build a really strong brand, whereas United Airlines and American Airlines, they're like your low cost providers that kind of do a lot of volume, but they don't get a lot of good, they don't get the best margins. And as we can see, like with Delta, 47 billion in last year in revenue, and it's, you know, it's been rising over time, so still pretty good. And net profit was 4.7 billion, which is about 10% of the net profit, which is pretty good. American Airlines, 45 billion. So remember, Delta is 47, this is 45, but they do 1.6 billion. So 1/3 of what Delta does in terms of net profit. So even though their revenues are pretty similar, because Delta is at 47 and American Airlines is at 45, you would think their net profit was similar. Though American Airlines is a low cost, so their margins aren't as good, so of course their net profits aren't as good. Hence why valuation is about less than 7 billion, even though they do just as much like revenue as Delta. And then we can kind of look at United Airlines, and it's about less than 9 billion, but they do 43 billion in revenue. So you can kind of see like 43 here, American Airlines 45, Delta 47, and then we look at the net profit, and it's about 3 billion in net profit, which is pretty good. It's actually double what American Airlines does. So you're kind of thinking this is 9 billion, and this is about close to 7 billion. Whereas they kind of their profits actually pretty impressive compared to the valuation, of course. Like compared to the valuation, and we look at the PE, and the PE is about 3. So yeah, this one's looking so far like it's the undervalued one by far, because I mean Delta's held up at 23 billion, and it only does 4.5, whereas this United Airlines does 3 billion, which is 2/3 of Delta, but it's worth significantly less than Delta, and just a slight bit ahead of American Airlines. And then we look at Southwest Airlines, $19.4 billion, and yeah, so what are we at here? PE of about close to like 8.79. So it's still, the PE has held up extremely well for this company. So like you can kind of see who the market loves in terms, and it has a lot of confidence in the company to do well. And why is that? Well, if we look at the revenues, and it's half of basically these large 3 airlines. It's at 22 billion, whereas United Airlines was 43, American Airlines 45, Delta 47. So you must be wondering, how has this company kept up when their revenue is only 22 billion, a lot less? Well, when we look at the net income is 2.3 billion. So they're with Delta in terms of margins from revenues to net profits. They get about 10%. As you can see here, 22 billion, and it translates to 2.3 billion, whereas Delta was 47 billion and it translated to 44.7 billion in net profit, whereas other two didn't quite stack up as much. So in terms of like quality wise, in terms of margins, Delta, like Southwest Airlines probably best margins, followed by Delta, then followed by United Airlines, and then followed by American Airlines. And you know, we can kind of see that and we go, okay, right, so in terms of profitability, you've got Delta and you've got Southwest. So, and if the companies have good margins, it also means that they don't have such a high expense structure when it comes to these things. And we can look at this and we go, what's the expense structure? So we're going to try to just like simplify things. I don't want to complicate things too much, but we're just going to focus on salaries and we're going to focus on aircraft maintenance, because at the end of the day, if you're not operating anything else, you still have aircraft maintenance and you still have wages to pay. So you can't escape that, and that's the thing right now. Airlines are basically in a situation where they cannot pay wages with revenues, because you're not getting any revenues. So you're going to have to cope. Well, they're getting some revenues, to be fair. They're getting some revenues, but it's probably not going to be covering wages. And you kind of get what I said at the start, that these companies run a very, very high cost structure. Like salaries is $11 billion and in aircraft maintenance is 1.7. So you add that up and they're looking at about $13 billion that they need to make up if they don't have revenues. Where do you find $13 billion? The problem is when we come to look at like their balance sheet, they only have 2.8 billion in cash. That's barely enough to cover. That's enough to cover maybe a quarter, like 3 months. Like you cover 3 months, but what are you going to do for the other 9 months? Of course, they might have earned a little bit more during, you know, still being able to fly a little bit partially this quarter. Though in general, they've got such a high expense structure that they cannot probably pay off. You know, they don't have enough money to pay their staff, which is incredibly difficult. So you can kind of see why these airlines need a lot of money to bail them out. And we can kind of, yeah, like look at all these other things like current maturities and debts and finances. Even their debts are like 2.2 billion, which is, their cash is only like a little bit more than their debt that's due. Never mind the expense structure. So that's where you're a bit worried that if these companies don't have money, like if they don't have someone to come in and save them, they're potentially dead in the water. So you can kind of look at American Airlines too, and their wages are actually slightly more, as you know, since they're a low cost producer, they do a lot of volume, but their margins aren't as good. So you can see 12.6 billion in terms of their wage structure, whereas compared to like Delta, 11.2. So you can only see where Delta's getting a bit more margin already. And then we look at like aircraft maintenance, and it's about 2.3 billion, whereas we looked here and it was like 1.7. So you can only see like in terms of costs, American Airlines already has higher costs, and then we can look at United Airlines, and salary is also 12 billion. So notice that these two low cost carriers both have like much higher cost structures than say like Delta, even though Delta does more revenue than both. Like this one does, you know, United Airlines does 43 billion, American Airlines does 45 billion, and Delta does 47. So Delta is way ahead of these two, yet it runs a much lower cost structure. And yeah, they probably charge a bit more, so that's where it's really making up in terms of their margins. And in terms of the aircraft maintenance, it's actually similar to Delta at 1.7 billion. So you can kind of see like Delta's got that slight advantage. That's why people are pricing the stock a bit higher. And then we look at Southwest Airlines. Their structure is 8 billion. So 8 billion is pretty high in the scheme of things, because remember, these three companies have around 12 billion in wages, but they do like, you know, high 40s in terms of revenue, whereas Southwest does only 22 billion, yet their wage structure is $8 billion. That's incredible, right? They do half the revenue, yet their wage structure is 2/3 of all the other three big airlines. And then the maintenance is 1.2 billion, which is still, it is around 2/3 as well. Whereas, you know, like basically it shows this is a, you know, a much more premium type airline that offers, you know, they've spent more on the service, but they also charge you more. Hence, why they get the bigger margins. And the other thing is, like, what's the balance sheet look like? 2.5 billion, 1.5 billion short term, so about 4 billion. 4 billion. Again, even this one, it's not going to be able to cover everything. It might cover like potentially 4 months, maybe 5 months if they're really lucky. But we also have to consider, like, this is a company that's going to have debt of 819 million due. You know, that doesn't seem that bad in comparison to a lot of things, because 800 million when you've got 4 billion doesn't seem too bad. And whereas we look at United Airlines, and United Airlines, they're about 4.8 billion in cash, while they have, where are we, about 1.4 billion in debt, which isn't bad. Like, this kind of makes me wonder, why did United Airlines get sold down so much more than everyone else? Because in terms of revenue, they keep up with the other two big ones. In terms of net profit, they're not the best one, but they are the second best in terms of net profit, as they do about 3 billion, whereas Delta does 4.7, and American Airlines is by far the worst when it comes to net profit at 1.6. And of course, you know, you've got Southwest, which is at 2.3. So you can kind of see, like, I'm starting to feel like, you know, United Airlines is the undervalued airline in terms of what we're seeing right here, in terms of the cash in the bank, the debt that's due, in terms of wage structure, maintenance. All three of these large players are very similar, and Southwest is about 2/3 when it comes to the wage structure, well, the expense structure in that regard. So if I was to rank these right now, you know, given what we've looked at, it's fairly sure, you know, we can be a bit more conclusive around how these airlines are going to hold up. Like, at the end of the day, like, if you look at this wage structure, these airlines don't really hold up. They could not handle themselves if there's no revenue in the next 12 months. That's to be fair, that article we saw at the start, it breathes a lot of truth in this. So I would say United Airlines is probably one of the ones that is really undervalued. And then I would probably say, like, in terms of the company that's, you know, doing really good margins, is Delta and also Southwest, and hence why these valuations have kind of stayed up. Though you kind of got to be wondering, like, what's the upside if you buy into these companies? If the upside is back up to around these 50s, whereas for United Airlines, it's back up to these 90s, and then you're looking at Southwest, and it'll be back up these 50s as well, from 37, and here you'll be back up to 30. So here they've been sold by, the American Airlines should be looking at potentially 100% return if they return to normal. American Airlines, you're looking at 200% in terms of returning back to normal, and in terms of Southwest, you'd be looking at about 50%, and the same with Delta, you're looking at 50%. So in terms of return-wise, risk-wise, I'd say United Airlines is probably the company that stands out a bit more to me. And I think it's probably fair to say American Airlines, it comes last, because it just has a high expense structure with really low margins, which does not bode well with me, you know. And you know, like these two are probably the market favorites, Southwest Airlines and Delta. And yeah, like I think these two are just call even. Like these two will be second even. It's just a matter of which one you like a bit more. But I'd probably say my first bet would say United Airlines probably will get you the most return. I think New Zealand's will be bailed out. And if they're not bailed out, well, you also have this lovely, lovely investor named Warren Buffett. And well, Warren Buffett happens to be holding an extreme amount of cash, $128 billion to be exact. So if they don't get a bailout, this guy owns 8% of all four companies. So what do you think he's going to do? Well, he's going to give them the money because he knows these companies in a good year would be extremely profitable, but he's going to do what he did in the last financial crisis. He's going to issue warrants, which allows him to convert to shares, and he's going to be able to do it at extremely low prices, and he's going to make so much money that he's going to be laughing to the bank. So in terms of would these four airlines go bankrupt? Probably not, but they will be suffering in terms of their share price, and they will be suffering in terms of having to figure out how they deal with the current situation, given they had to cut majority of their flights, and you know they got to look after their staff. They probably are going to be firing a lot of people, and that's you know realistic enough, as you can see. Yeah, the famed investor counts Delta Airlines, Southwest, United, and American Airlines as his investments. Buffett actually has been more investing into Delta, because I guess he likes the margins of Delta, and it's also larger, so he can just pump more money in there without, you know, going against his own rules, well, going against the regulation, where if you get too large in an investment, there's all these different reporting rules. So in terms of, well, you know, the airlines, as I stick with what I do reaffirm, United Airlines, Delta, Southwest being both pretty equal. I think it wouldn't matter. Maybe you might go Delta because they're a larger one. Like potentially that gives them a bit more to stand on because they're larger. So if we go like United, Delta, Southwest, and last of all American Airlines. To be honest, I wouldn't bother with American Airlines. Um, just like low margins is no way to do a business. Like it's great in a booming environment, though. Your share price has only been cut in half, and you know your margins aren't great. So there's going to be a lot of pressures currently. Of course, you know, of course, like oil prices are down. That's one like thing that's going really well for these companies. Oil prices slightly below $30, which you know you kind of feel good about, I guess, if you're thinking that you know that this company's trying to keep costs down. So what's the point of being able to keep you know your variable costs down? Because if you're not flying much, you're not using much oil to begin with, and that's the thing. Oil's not that big of a problem right now. The problem is having the cash to pay your staff and then being able to keep afloat for the next 12 months while everything kind of gets back to normal. Well, that's kind of my opinion anyway. Like, of course, you'll have your own opinion, and you know, like I'd love to hear your opinion. Like in terms of these four stocks, how would you rank them in terms of best to worst? Or if you've got any other companies that you want me to look at, then feel free to just comment below. I know this video has gone on for a bit more than the usual one, but going through these airlines is no easy challenge because there's just so many variables going through it. I tried to like simplify it to the main points, and hopefully this was helpful in some regard in terms of making a financial decision. Though of course, do your own research, come up with your own opinion, and you know, at this kind of market, I think things may get a little tougher for these airlines before they get better. But if you're there, if you're buying this year and you're there for next year, you're going to see the rewards. and as always, hold a bit of cash, because currently in this economy, cash is basically king at the moment. And until then, well, good luck investing, everyone.